So thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to look at a license to practice. What is it? Why do you need it? How do you get it? My name is Chantal Cook. I'm the CEO of NALP, and I'll be taking us through the license to practice today. So if you've got any questions, please make sure that you email us if they're specific to you. Email us at admin@nationalparalegals.co.uk. That's the best way to get your license to practice questions answered. So I'm going to get started and start off with what is a license to practice? Like, what is it? So basically what it is it enables you to offer your services direct to the public. So lots of paralegal work, as we know, is done within a law firm or perhaps in-house within a large company or something like that. But as a paralegal, you are absolutely allowed to offer your services direct to the public, provided that you do have, as a NALP member, a license to practice. And that is kind of, it says what it does on the tin, basically. It is a license to practice. And you can do that for all sorts of areas of law that paralegals are allowed to practice, obviously in the non-reserved activity areas, clearly. But there are two areas where you cannot have a license to practice, and that's because these are externally regulated in a different way, and that is conveyancing and immigration. But all other forms of paralegal work, you can have a license to practice, and that will enable you, as I said, to offer your services direct to the public. What a license to practice also does is give the public confidence and kind of comfort in using you. So whenever you set up your own business, you know, it's tough out there. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And getting new clients is one of the most important things as a paralegal. If you're opening your business, you need to get people through the door. You need to have work and get paid for it. And a license to practice can really help in a number of ways. So it shows that you are competent, that you're qualified, that you have professional indemnity insurance, and I'll come to eligibility in a moment. It basically gives potential clients and customers and so on comfort that they can trust you if they deal with you. Because we all know, we've all dealt with people in the past who have not been what we hoped they were. Well, having a license to practice helps people have that confidence that you will deliver what it is that they're employing you or asking you to do. So that's the first thing, is it's definitely a good thing for you because it helps with the confidence. It also sets you apart from other paralegals. Now, as we know, paralegals being an unregulated area has its pros and its cons. And one of the cons of it is, of course, that lots of people can set themselves up as a paralegal and doesn't necessarily mean they have the qualifications. We know that as NALP members, that does not apply to you. You have the experience and the qualifications and all the rest of it as you need, and you've chosen to be part of a membership body like NALP in order to prove your quality, let's say, of the work that you can do. And your license to practice is another level of that. It's a proof that you take the paralegal business seriously and that you will offer that. So it's a really important piece of your credibility, and really as part of your marketing as well. And you absolutely should use it as part of your marketing. Say, I've got a license to practice. Let your customers know what that license to practice is. So as I said, it's good for you because it enables you to shout about what you do and to shout about the areas in which you're particularly qualified in your expertise. Talking of that, then that kind of moves us on to eligibility. So you've got to be a member of NALP in the first place. You've got to have at least associate membership. Most people with a license to practice tend to have a higher level of membership, but you do have to have at least an associate membership level. That's the first thing. You have to have at least 3 years experience during the last 5 years in the area that you want to do your license to practice in. So your license to practice is not a generic thing. It's not any area of law, you're covered. A license to practice is specifically in the areas in which you want to offer your services direct to the public. So you need to say in your application, these are the areas that I want to work in with my license to practice. And then as part of that, you will be asked to provide evidence to show that you have the relevant experience. So that is, as I said, at least 3 years experience during the last 5 years. I'm sorry if you did it 20 years ago, however great you might have been, it's not going to count. It's got to be recent because, as we all know, the law changes all the time. It's got to be recent experience, and it's got to be at least 3 years experience. As I mentioned, there are a couple of areas that you cannot have a license to practice in, and that's conveyancing and immigration, just as a quick reminder. But everything else that paralegals can do, you can have your license to practice. So eligibility, membership, your 3 years experience, and then you must have professional indemnity insurance. That is really, really important. Without that, you cannot have a license to practice. And without that, you should not ever be offering your services direct to the public. When you have that professional indemnity insurance, or PII, you need to make sure that that insurance covers you for the activities that you will be doing. So some insurance policies will say that they don't cover any activities within the law, and some are much more specific, and they will say, for example, you cannot undertake any reserved activities within the law. That's fine, because you won't be anyway. So as long as your PII insurance covers you for the work that you're doing and doesn't stipulate that it's not covering you, then that should be absolutely fine. That means you are covered. So that's another thing you have to have: your membership, your 3 years experience, and your professional indemnity insurance. So, okay, let's say you've got all of those things. So that's good. You want your license to practice. What happens next? So the application process. So you can go onto our website, or again, you can email us and we can send you the application form if you prefer. But you fill in that application form, ask you a bunch of relatively straightforward questions on there that you should be able to answer, but it will also ask you to supply the evidence that is required as well. So we will need to look at a copy of your professional indemnity insurance, for example. You will need to obviously give us your membership number to show what level of membership you have currently at NALP, and you will also need to provide evidence of the 3 years of experience within the last 5 years that are relevant to the area that you're working in. So let's talk about evidence for a second. Could be that you were employed by somebody and you've decided to leave that particular business and now you're setting up on your own. That's fine. You will have you can get a letter from your employer saying, this person did this kind of work during this period. That would be fine, for example. Maybe you've helped other clients previously in some way. Well, you could go back and talk to those clients and ask them to give you a letter saying, this person did this kind of work for us, and so on. So we're not asking for testimonials from clients. What we're asking for is evidence that you did the work. That's what we're looking for. If you're stuck and you're not sure on your specific situation, then get in touch with Ashley. She will be able to explain to you what we're looking for. But please do remember that we will require evidence. This is not just a case of tell us you've got it, it's fine, we'll give you a license. That's not how it works. This is very, very important that you do have the evidence and you have everything in place to have that. And the reason that's important is because the license has to be something that is credible. It has to be something that means something. So just something that you can pay for, easy as that may be, and anybody gets it, that doesn't mean anything. This license to practice means something because you have to prove that you have all the right criteria in place, that you are actually eligible. And that's why we go through this quite important process with Ashley, checking all of this to make sure that you are eligible and that you do qualify. So when you fill in that application form, make sure you send as much of that information with the application form as you can, because otherwise all that will happen is it will delay the process. And then Ashley's going to have to email you and ask you for this and ask you for that. And it just delays everything. So if you want to get this moving fast as possible, fill in the application form and then include all the evidence that you think is going to give you the information that we're asking for, basically. So make sure you include it in that application, and that will definitely speed things up. Not saying there might not be another question, but at least you're moving through the process much, much faster. Okay, so you fill in the application. It then gets reviewed at our side. If there's more evidence that we require, we'll come back to you and ask you, or ask for some clarifying questions or whatever it happens to be. And then assuming that you go through that process, you come out the other end, you are eligible. And obviously our aim is to help you get that license to practice. But I say we do need to make sure that you're eligible. We're not here to try and stop you. We are here to help you through the process. So talk to us if necessary. Hopefully you come out the other end, you've got your license to practice, and you get a certificate which basically proves that you have that license to practice. And that certificate then you can use on your website, you can use on social media, you can have it, in your pitch decks if you're talking to clients, office wall, whatever it happens to be. And that license to practice then will last you for a year. That's a year-long license to practice. I'll come to renewals in a moment. So you've got your license to practice, and then at that point, you can go out and you can offer your services, as I said, direct to the public with your license to practice. Another thing I should mention at that point as well, once you've got your license to practice, you definitely want to update your entry on the National Paralegal Register, the NPR, because that is where people look for paralegals, and they can search for people who have got a license to practice, meaning that they can offer their services direct to the public. So if you get your license to practice, make sure you go into your membership in the back end of the website, you know, where you have your membership portal, and then you update yourself there, and that you make sure you update your register on the NPR. Again, any problems, get in touch, we can help you through it. Okay, as I mentioned, the license to practice lasts for a year. And then you need to renew it each year. So renewal, sometimes that's we won't ask you for any additional information other than your CPD. I'll come to that in a second. Sometimes we will ask you to prove I've got up-to-date PII, or that if you're looking to change something, we might ask for some other information or whatever. We do this partly in situations where we feel more information might be required now because things have changed. Maybe things have changed at our end, things have changed at your end. Maybe you've had a license to practice for a long time and we just want to make sure that you're up to date and everything. And sometimes it's a random process deliberately designed to make sure that, again, this is a robust license to practice that actually means something that has credibility. So don't please be offended if we say, can we have this information from you? There is a reason and a rationale behind it. And we will almost always ask you again for an updated PII to prove that your insurance policy continues into your next year of your license to practice. And we will ask for proof of 12 hours of CPD. So as part of a license to practice, you have to have CPD, continuing professional development, and you need to show 12 hours of that. So it's not a huge amount, but the idea is, again, to make sure that you're up to date on the law and all the different things that have happened. So those are the things that you need to make sure that you have. And then at that point, it said you can renew. So that's basically the process. That's how it works. I think the only thing I haven't mentioned, that I suspect you're all wondering, is how much does it cost? So you have to have your membership already, minimum associate membership. So you've got your membership fee for that, which you would already have in place. And then on top of that, the application fee for a license to practice is just £100. And that takes you through the application and allows us to do all the due diligence at our end to make sure that everything's working right. And that is payable every year. So because we recheck your application each time, we have to check your CPD, you have to check your insurance, etc. But it's just £100 to apply for the license to practice. So that's a quick kind of run through of how the license to practice works, what it is, and how you get it. Hopefully a very straightforward process. So I'm going to open the floor up to any questions. As I mentioned before, if they're very specific to you, it's best really, as I said, to email us and have a chat with Ashley and she can talk you through it. But if you've got anything more general, then I can certainly try and answer those. So I'm going to let Nigel jump in as well if he wants to, if he's got any questions he'd like to ask on your behalf, if there's any sort of in the background. But Missouri was one of the questions. So yes. Essentially, it doesn't change anything. I think you probably have seen the advice that we got after the Missouri ruling. And if you haven't, we've got a link to it on our website, or we can email that out to you. But essentially, that the Missouri ruling doesn't change anything. You can still do the work that we've always said you can do, and you still cannot do the work that you couldn't do before. So you still cannot be involved in litigation because that is a reserved activity. That would still be the same if you had a license to practice. Your license to practice doesn't suddenly mean you can now do reserved activities. Doesn't mean that at all. But it does mean that you can offer your paralegal activities, in other words, your non-reserved activities, you can offer those direct to the public. So I hope that clarifies things. Missouri doesn't change anything as far as we're concerned as paralegals, and the license to practice doesn't change anything either. So hopefully that's clear. Nigel, anything else you can think that I've missed that anybody might need to know? Because we've rattled through this very fast, but hopefully it's kind of giving you everything that you need to know to understand for a license to practice. And as I keep saying, contact us if you have any problems. We're more than happy to talk you through that process. It's no problem at all. That's what we're here for. So do give us a shout. So anyway, Nigel, sorry.
What can we do in family law in terms of divorce?
So again, you as a paralegal, as long as the things that you're doing within family law and divorce do not come under a reserved activity, then it's fine. You can absolutely do family law. You can have a license to practice within that. It's always about the reserved versus the non-reserved activities. That's where it always in the end boils down to. The license to practice doesn't change that. If it's a non-reserved activity that a paralegal can do, apart from the exceptions that I've talked about, immigration and conveyancing, that is something that you can do. If not, so it's a reserved activity, then the license to practice doesn't change that. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope we've covered everything that you need to know. Any questions, get in touch and we'll be happy to answer them. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in April. And our deep dive webinars looking at our qualifications and plus the skills that you need in order to develop your career. All webinars that are coming up in the future. If you've got any feedback, please let us know. Please fill in the feedback form. And if there's any particular types of webinar that you'd really like us to cover, for example, this one was actually done because we had a large number of requests for people asking for a license to practice webinar. So if you've got a particular topic you'd like us to cover, then let us know and we will do our best to cover that as a webinar in the future. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a lovely, lovely afternoon and we'll see you soon.